So the last time we had Scott Harris on, we were talking about selling at the deadline.
Mm-hmm.
I'm asking him about wasting Tarek Skubal. Baez buyouts, we're poking him on payroll. 10 months later, they got the best record in baseball. The organization's incredibly healthy. Scott, good morning.
Good morning. And the best thing is my 1-year-old is still asleep at 8 a.m., so I'm going to try to do the whole interview without waking her up.
Oh, wow. That's a huge – you're winning on all fronts.
Yeah, it's been a good day so far.
Walking the tightrope with us. So it has to be more fun right now when you're winning and your team is in a position to be buyers headed into the trade deadline. Would it be fair to say you guys are positioned to be buyers?
I hope so. We're 20 games over 500 right now. We're playing really well. So I think we're preparing to add to this team in July, but we got to keep playing well to put ourselves in a position to do that.
So I guess, and maybe this is, you already answered it, but as you approach the trade deadline, obviously it's a little bit different. Your team is in a much different position now than your first couple of years. How do you manage your philosophy? What is your philosophy as you approach a trade deadline where you can be buyers?
Yeah, we're going to be pragmatic at the deadline. We're going to take a cold, hard look at our weaknesses and try to turn those weaknesses into strengths. You know, if we identify a specific weakness and the market has players available who we think can address, that weakness, we're going to chase those players aggressively. It's always been my approach in Chicago and San Francisco. You know, we don't really get caught up in the headlines or the momentum. We just hunt for players that we think can help us, just like we did this offseason, and we came away with Gleyber Torres, Jack Flaherty, and Tommy Kahnle. Those guys have been huge for us this year, and you don't really get to those guys without just staying focused on your exact weaknesses and how the players available can address those weaknesses. So I think we're going to take the same approach at the deadline.
Team can change between now and the deadline. Right now, bigger need is an arm, a bat. How do you see it?
You know, I don't really know right now because we're still banged up. It's hard to believe that we're in the position that we are, and we still have had so many injuries. A player that I know the fans love and we love internally is Matt Vierling. He's kind of a glue guy for our roster. He allows us to position our other players in different situations because he can play the infield, he can play the outfield, he mauls left-handed pitching, he hits right-handed pitching as well. I'm looking forward to getting him back and seeing how the roster takes shape when he's back offensively. And then, pitching-wise, we're still down, 4 starters plus Jose Urquidy. And then in the bullpen, Alex Lang is down. We lost Jason Foley. So I think there's some time for us to get healthy and see what the roster looks like before we can identify the specific weaknesses that we set out to address through the trade deadline.
As a former player, no matter the sport, everybody just wants to win. Everybody wants to win more, and they want to win championships. But there's always this question that we get about the clubhouse. When you add a player, it also means you have to subtract one. How do you manage the emotions of the clubhouse along with just the chemistry of the clubhouse in subtracting a player and obviously adding someone that you're going to throw into that clubhouse? How do you handle that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think the first question we ask ourselves when we set out to add a player in free agency or via trade is, what kind of guy is he? What kind of teammate is he? Is he going to lift up the entire clubhouse or is he going to drag down the clubhouse? We do a lot of work behind the scenes on all of these players. We talk to a lot of former teammates, a lot of former coaches to try to figure out what kind of guy they are before we add them to this clubhouse. This offseason, I think we added some really good baseball players, but we added a lot of culture to this clubhouse too. Our additions have been really popular, in the clubhouse, on the plane, on the road. So that's the first thing we do, even before we evaluate the talent. With respect to adding and subtracting, it's the nature of the beast. We try to do it in an empathetic way. We try to be, hyper conscious of what makes this team good and make sure that we don't disrupt that. But, chemistry is going to be it's going to be front and center with any potential addition that we make. We're going to spend a lot of time on it. We're going to make sure that we don't disrupt one of the best things going for us, which is the chemistry that we have in the clubhouse right now.
Talking to Scott Harris, president of baseball operations for the Detroit Tigers. I mentioned your organization's in a healthy place. Farm system looks well-stocked. In the offseason, you mentioned you guys are in a position where you'd be willing to give up prospects to add impact players. with the success you guys have had, is it, hey, there's an urgency to capitalize on a World Series opportunity, or because you guys have been so successful, do you feel like we don't have to do that? We're a really good baseball team.
Yeah, I think it depends on the opportunity. I'm really proud of where we're at in the big leagues right now. In my opening press conference, I set out to build through development and create a critical mass of young players that can help us win at this level, but also are going to stay together and play together for a long time. I think we have that in the big leagues. And then, for those of you who've been watching the minor leagues too, our minor league system is dominating on both sides of the ball. We're one of the best overall pitching staffs through all the levels in the minor leagues, and one of the best offenses. We're hitting the ball really hard. We're making really good decisions at the plate. So this organization is about as healthy as it's been, and we have this feeling that, this team's going to continue to get better. We're going to continue to add impact talent through our farm system to this group of players that's already going to stay together and play together for a while. So it doesn't feel like a moment in time where, hey, we gotta maximize our chances of winning the World Series in this specific year. We're going to do everything we can to try to win the World Series this year, but there's a real feeling here that we're hopefully going to keep doing our jobs, keep playing at a really high level, and have multiple opportunities to try to win the World Series. Because anyone who's followed an organization for a long time knows that the best way to win the World Series is position yourself to be in the mix in October every single year. We haven't done anything yet. We don't have it all figured out in this organization, but there's this feeling of momentum in this organization. I've seen it before in different organizations. I was in Chicago when I had a similar feeling of, we have some young talent that's already performing in the big leagues, and we got more on the way. And that's a pretty good blueprint for making noise in October year over year.
How much in regards to adding to this team at the trade deadline is it just simply the needs that the team has, or as you get closer, obviously the playoff picture starts to clarify a little bit, and you're thinking about who you may face in the postseason, who you may face across, if you're able to make to the World Series, matchups. How much does that play into who you want to add to this team?
Yeah, I think the way I look at it, the way AJ looks at it, is we got to make sure that we are tough to play. We got to make sure that we are really unpredictable. We got to make sure that we are really hard to match up with. I think one of the reasons why, we're 20 games over right now, and across, last year's second half plus this year, we're something like 40 games over right now, is it's really hard to play us right now. It's really hard to match up with our lineup, and it's even harder to keep up with the in-game moves that we're making. And then when we get a lead, we have some dominant relievers at the back end that have done a really good job of holding those leads, just like, Kahnle invested last night. So I think we're going to focus on trying to make ourselves as unpredictable and tough to match up with as possible, as opposed to, just focusing on, the Yankees or the Mariners or the Astros and trying to match up specifically with them. It's the recipe that we took last year. It was, some of the logic behind the pitching chaos and some of the pinch hitting moves that, powered that team to the playoffs and helped us beat the Astros. So I think we're going to stay focused on ourselves and try to be as difficult to match up with as possible, and I think that'll serve us well.
Scott, I feel like every time you do one of these media hits, you get asked about Tarek Skubal and his extension. And I think it comes from the place where we sit, where every time he pitches well, fans scream, lock him up, get him signed. What do you say to that rabid fan base that really wants this guy committed here long term?
I say I'm watching him pitch too, and I love watching him pitch, and I'm really proud that he's a Tiger right now. Sometimes it sounds a lot easier to just, lock them up and sign extensions and just get it done because you feel like it. It's a lot harder than that. We have taken a very, intentional and targeted approach to retaining young players. I said it the first day I was a Tiger that we want to acquire, develop, and retain young talent. We've already done it once with one of our young players in Cole Keith. We're really proud of that deal, but the one thing that we're not going to do is we're not going to talk about negotiations before we've reached a deal. It's not fair to the player. It's not fair to the organization. And it's not fair to the entire industry to kind of float out offers or, counters or any of that stuff. These things are really hard to get done. We're working as hard as we can to keep what we think is a really good group around as long as we can, because these guys have done special things at this level, and we think, they're still really young, they're still really talented, and they're going to keep getting better. So we're going to try to keep him around as long as we can.
Yeah, I think it was the chat you had with the guys in New York Post, and you said it takes two to tango. Just a chance to clarify, are you getting any resistance from the Scooball camp? Because I think some took that comment that way.
Yeah, listen, I'm just not going to talk about it.
Okay.
I totally understand the question. It's a fair question. It's really not fair in this case to Tarek or his representation to talk about any sort of resistance or offers and counters. It's both not fair to them, and it's also not going to help us reach a deal.
Who's been maybe the best pleasant surprise? Because we've seen Spencer Torkelson. Not you guys even made the adjustment of putting Colt Keith at first base. Now he is your first baseman. In fact, we all believe that he should be an all-star this year. Colt Keith has done a tremendous job this year. Javi Baez, we know the struggles that he had for 3 years, what he's done. Who's been, I don't know if you can even pick, but who's been the pleasant surprise for you this season?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really glad to say that that's a really tough question. There's some great stories up and down our roster. I think when you look at, for instance, our position playing group, the thing I'm most proud of is almost to a man, every player on our roster has faced some sort of adversity. There's always been a moment in time where, media was asking them tough questions or social media was, shouting at them because they're underperforming. But they've come through the other side and they're performing at a really high level. I think of, Zach McKinstry, who hit 2 triples last night. Like, that's development. What he's doing right now is development because he worked really hard behind the scenes to address his own shortcomings and turn them into strengths. And now he's a really big part of our team right now. Dylan Dingler came up last year and, he really struggled down the stretch. I think there were a lot of questions about our catching situation. Now he's performing like one of the best catchers in all of baseball on both sides of the ball. Torkelson, couldn't be prouder of him, not only for the performance that he is putting together right now, but for the concrete adjustments that he made this offseason. These guys have all had a ton of success in amateur baseball and in the minor leagues, and sometimes it's hard to embrace an adjustment at this level against the best pitching they've ever seen. But a guy like Tork, he worked really hard this offseason, and he was open-minded enough to make real adjustments, and now he's being rewarded for that. There's just great stories up and down our roster, and we're really proud of not only the individual for putting in the hard work, but the environment that we've created in Detroit, whereby development can happen even at the highest level, and it can translate into wins like you're seeing right now.
Yeah, there's a ton of really good stories. I want to get you out of here on this. The idea of untouchables at a trade deadline. We can list all the really talented minor league players you guys have collected. Do you consider anyone untouchable when you go into trade negotiations?
No, I mean, I think philosophically, I don't consider anyone untouchable. But my job is to position this organization to win as much as we can. And so I don't think, trading some players that have a chance to be impact big leaguers for a long time in Detroit is the smartest thing to do. So, again, we're going to try to be pragmatic. We're going to look at both sides of a potential deal, and we're going to try to make the ones that we think are going to help us, get to the next level both this year and in the future.
Scott, we appreciate the time. We realize the deadline's not tomorrow, and we also understand you can't give us the entire blueprint. So we appreciate the insights this morning.
Time.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Great talking with you.
All right, that's Scott Harris, President of Baseball Operations, Detroit Tigers, 97.1.